an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sex Education, Season 3, Episode 7. In this episode, there is so much going on this episode. Hope is getting in literal cat fights up in the AV room, locking students into offices. We've got a search for a missing girl and a couple of besties hitting the road. We've got Jean going into labor, which does not go well. And everything is kind of hitting the fan at the same time. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. Okay, so I'm going to start, guys, again, this episode just kept making me really, really emotional. It just will not let me be. And it's remarkable how different it feels to be emotionally, riled up by a show that feels like, not that that's not the intention, because of course they want you to be affected, but it doesn't feel like they linger on anything so long that it's giving you the cue of, okay, now you should cry, or now you should be worried, or anything. They are just showing you the thing and basically trusting in the fact that you are invested enough at this point for it to just be enough. And it just is over and over again. And I am not ready at all for any of it. I'm going to deal with the part I hate the most first. Well, I won't say it's the part I hate the most, because the part I hate the most is what's going on with Jean. But a part that I was selfishly almost hoping wouldn't be a thing at all is the fact that Eric kissed somebody else and then decides to tell Adam the truth. Do I think telling Adam was the right thing to do? Yes. I think that Eric has the kind of conscience where their relationship could not recover if he didn't tell the truth. Because when you are somebody who actually has empathy and you are lying to your partner, and I say this from experience, by the way, and you are lying to your partner, it creates a distance between you, even if you are lying well. It doesn't matter that they don't know. Your guilt starts to build a wall, and eventually it will spell disaster for the relationship, whether they know about cheating or not. It doesn't matter. Again, that only happens if you actually have empathy. And there are plenty of people out there who can be perfectly natural with a partner, even if they're cheating. And those people are called sociopaths. And anybody who can just completely have no feelings about the fact that they are out here behind somebody's back isn't a person. Just, that's not normal or right. And it's something that they need to go to therapy for. And I'm just going to say that straight up across the board. I am not even going to mince words on it. You could come at me if you want. I am not changing my stance on that at all. Again, speaking from experience, I believe that my relationship with Brendan was doomed before I started cheating, but once I did, it was absolutely the nail in the coffin, and it's just accelerated everything and made it so that even if there had been a hope for us to work through things in couples therapy or anything like that, there was no way now. It was just over. And it killed me, knowing that I was hurting him, but I was also hurting so much. And it was just the kind of thing that it was a different situation because it was an ongoing thing with somebody else that I actually really cared about. And with Eric, it is this sort of like spur of the moment thing that clearly blossoms because of a kind of high that he experiences being in a place that he has never been before, surrounded by people like himself, after also just like kind of low-key being afraid for his life minutes earlier, and realizing that he is not only safe, but like safer even than he might have been at home in some ways in this immediate location. Obviously not in Nigeria at large, but right where he is. And so I really kind of do understand why it happened. I hate that it happened in like, you know, the sense of what it's doing with him and Adam, because I love him and Adam together. But I get, like, when people say it just happened, usually I'm like, get the fuck out of here. It just happened. But honestly, this is like one of the rare situations where I kind of feel like it did just happen. That's not at all usually the case. And I'm not trying to defend Eric, because he knew he was doing something fucked up and he hesitated. Like, he knew he could have just stopped it right there and he didn't. So I'm not trying to say that he's not culpable, but it just, it's got context to it that does change things for me a little bit. And it makes me have a lot more sympathy for both of them. And the way that Adam reacts, this guy's acting, guys, is just so good. The guy playing Adam is killing it. I don't know where they found this dude. I don't know why he's not in more stuff. Speaking of which, Eric is going to be the next Doctor Who, which is dope as fuck. But I can't get over the, like, think about it. Adam had been fucking Amy the first time we ever saw him in this show. Is that not the weirdest thing to think about? Him and Amy? Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. And he was such a, like, brick wall bully piece of shit. And we're here now, and it doesn't feel unnatural at all, because I feel like this actor pulls off all of the fluctuations in emotions, all of the like undercurrent of misery while he's bullying that makes it feel like you do have sympathy. Making somebody have sympathy for a bully is very tricky, because a lot of people just try to take the sort of like the very surface, superficial way out and do things that feel kind of cheap. And I just never felt that way with Adam. Now, I've said, and I stand by, that I have, like, you know, I have my reservations about having the bully and the guy he bullied be a couple now. But also, I feel like the way it was done well. So, I don't know. But yeah, the fact that these two are kind of like hitting a wall now is so upsetting, especially because Adam still hasn't told his mother he's gay, and he hasn't told his mother that this is a relationship. So he's going to be absolutely fucking heartbroken, and he won't be able to tell her about any of it. And I truly don't know what to think about the fact that he's gone through this like devastation just before his father is about to spend the night after everything. I can't think of a worse time for his dad to drop into his life again. And it may work out, because like Michael is definitely making progress towards being a person, but it's just the kind of thing that very understandably could lead to Adam completely shutting him out because of how vulnerable he feels right now, in a way that he may have been more receptive 3 days earlier, you know? So anyway, that is what's going on with Adam. Also, he is training Madam, the dog, to do tricks, and is going to be entering into a dog show, apparently. And I am loving this for him so much. I said at like, might be the end of season 1 or beginning of season 2, like it was really clear that his thing was working with dogs, and I wanted him to go into that. And I hope so. You know, I'm not trying to say that finding like a career or anything is a way to happiness, because God knows we put a lot of weight on that, and I don't feel like it's fair. But this isn't necessarily a career either. It might just be a hobby, and that can be so fulfilling and so rewarding. So, okay. Let's talk about Michael. Let's talk about the first part where I started to almost cry. Michael, this actor, again, another one that is just devastating. Ugh. When we see him in the kitchen assembling this gorgeous salad, and he is so full of joy, I got so choked up, you guys. this is the sort of thing that hits me where I live because food is so important to me personally. And a lot of the reason for that is because of how I was raised. My mother was a good cook. My grandmother who taught her was also a really good cook. And they were not white people cooks. They are white people, but they did not cook that way, which is part of why it took me so long to understand the stereotype about white people not seasoning their food. Even though I did have that experience, like I would have my mother's apple pie and my mother would put, several teaspoons of cinnamon, a teaspoon of cloves, maybe half a teaspoon of like ginger or even cardamom. She would kill it with that filling. And it was this fragrant, gorgeous thing with this crust. And then I would go to a friend's house and they would be like, oh, my mom made apple pie. And it was this like limp, like the apples wouldn't even be fully cooked inside. It would be sort of gluey because they would add a ton of cornstarch to the filling. And it was like a teaspoon of cinnamon, maybe a scant teaspoon. It was like nothing. And I could not figure it out for so long. Why every time that I ate anybody else's cooking, I was so disappointed. I was just like, and now I know those people were almost always white, and it was definitely, this is a stereotype that for me feels honestly very justified. It's not to say that all white people do this, because clearly my mom and my grandma are demonstrations that that is not true of everyone. But it certainly comes from somewhere. And so I grew up with this like feeling of comfort around food, especially feeling like I was at home when things tasted a certain way, when the house smelled a certain way. And there was a really strong tradition around certain foods being made at certain times of year and only those times of year. And it wasn't like the kind of thing where you couldn't make it other times of year, like it would be like, frowned upon. It was simply, it was so suited to, autumn or Christmas or Valentine's Day that you just only made it then. And so it became that the scent immediately transported you to that time of year. And to this day, certain combinations of scents, like for me, the smell of roasting pork combined with the scent of cinnamon, that is autumn for me. That's just... My grandmother would make a roasted pork loin with like apples, potatoes, and carrots. And she would also have in the oven at the same time a pumpkin pie, apple pie, maybe like a bread pudding. And it's just one of those things that like fills you with this instantaneous nostalgia, this moment of presence. And I think that's kind of what is difficult these days. And I am not somebody who is like, ever since the introduction of technology, life has gone down the drain at all, because technology is crucial to us, like knowing what we do about society. And I think it's spurring our steps forward, but it does interfere with our ability to be present. And it makes us constantly distracted in a way. And scent has a way of pulling you out of that sometimes. I know that it has happened to me where I will be on my phone and I will suddenly smell something because it's finally beginning to grow warm, that it's fragrant coming from the kitchen. And all of a sudden my head turns and I'm out of my phone entirely. It's just this thing, So this moment of him finding this joy when he's making a salad is so profound for me. And it just got me so choked up watching it. I'm getting choked up just talking about it. This is what he remembers about his mother, is the way that she cooked. And it's something that he is clearly, I had that scene where I was kind of confused about his reaction to the fajitas that they made. And his like exclamation over the flavors and the spices. And now it becomes clear he hasn't experienced very much in terms of like the intensity of flavors out there. And maybe that's because his wife wasn't a very good cook. No shade to her. Not everybody is a good cook. It's fine. And she clearly like managed the entire household. So I am not mad at her if she just kind of did the bare minimum in terms of getting food on the table. But it definitely points to the fact that food means something to him that he wasn't really aware of. And all of a sudden he's beginning to realize that that is something for him. And maybe he was even purposely avoiding because he mourns his mother. And that can be a thing, you know, like it can trigger some kinds of memories that aren't necessarily unpleasant, but they're difficult. So he makes this salad and he goes to his brother's dinner for his birthday. And Adam and his mom talk about it briefly for a second. And I love that Adam like calls his brother a dick and is like, you're splitting up anyway. I don't even know why you're going. And she doesn't. She winds up canceling. But when his brother calls Michael and tells him that he invited her, first of all, he is not at all concerned about what it would be doing to Michael. In fact, there's a part of me that feels like he wants it to be awkward for Michael because he would enjoy it, because he would find it amusing and entertaining, because he's a fucking monster and a bully. So Michael makes this gorgeous salad. Apparently it has feta, parsley, pomegranate seeds. Like there's all these things that he's talking about. And I'm just like, this sounds so good. What? And people are complimenting it at the table, not knowing that he made it because his brother is giving credit to the caterer. So Michael says he made it. And somebody says, I love a man who can cook. And his brother immediately tries to belittle him by saying, well, a salad isn't really cooking, is it? Look, anybody who actually cooks knows, yeah, it is. Like, I'm not saying like putting together just a normal green salad that's got, you know, some tomatoes and some iceberg lettuce and whatever is like a big deal. But if you don't think that salads as like a group are cooking, you don't know how to make salad. That's just all there is to it. And I say this all the time. People who say I hate salad are doing it wrong. That's on you. You could choose to branch out and figure out how to do salad properly. And you're not doing that. So I'm not going to even enter into this conversation with you. Salad slaps. It does. I love salad. You just have to know how to do it properly. And clearly Michael knows how to do it properly. So his brother begins to mock him for the fact that he is like clearly has too much time on his hands because he's using pomegranate seeds in a thing. Obviously, his brother doesn't like that Michael is in the spotlight in any way, that he's getting any sort of props at all. It's very clear for him. It's his birthday. The night is supposed to be about him and what he wants. And what he wants is for his brother to shut the fuck up and take his fucking licks because that is his entertainment. And Michael fucking snaps in one of the most beautiful moments. And this is the kind of thing that it really often only happens in television, movies, books. This is rare for it to happen in life. But it can. It's just really, really rare. But Michael stands up and he says the exact thing he needs to say. And that's kind of what I mean about, like, people will snap and they'll be like, you know what, I'm drawing a fucking line. And that happens in life. But having a really eloquent moment where you truly say exactly what needs saying, and the person you are saying it to, like, seems to crumble and have no defense, that's rare. Usually a person will completely defend themselves, even if they aren't doing it eloquently, or if they're like, they will be angry rather than cowed, which is how his brother responds. I don't care that it's not realistic. It's so satisfying. Thank you. Let me have this in my fiction. That's all I'm saying. So he tells his brother, basically, my life is a failure. I'm breaking up with my wife. My son hates me. I'm unemployed. And I would still rather be all those things than an utter piece of shit like you. And I know that you bullied me so that Dad wouldn't bully you. And that's really sad. But frankly, it's not my fucking problem anymore. And he leaves, and it is the most beautiful. That is the key to a lot of dealing with people who have their own trauma. You can understand why they're doing what they're doing. I understand that you bullied me to keep Dad from bullying you. But then you have to say, I am not responsible for the trauma you went through. I have to protect myself. and draw a line, because now as adults, we are each responsible for our own behavior and examining why we do what we do. And if you are never going to cope with the fact that you were bullied in a way and that you are continuing to perpetuate that, I am not interested in continuing this relationship because it's not worth it, you know? And I really wonder how he's going to deal with the fact that he became a bully. Because he can't just swoop back into Adam's life and say that he's sorry and undo what he did to his son. You know, it's very easy to sort of forget what Michael was like because of what he's been through recently and the struggles that we've seen with his past, and be like, oh, this guy is like, he did fucked up things. He photocopied Jean's whole notebook and shared everybody's like really private, upsetting their confidences, you know? He bullied his son and made him feel like shit, sent him to military school, like everything that you can think of to make your kid feel like they are nothing and won't amount to anything and that you don't even want to acknowledge them. Like, it's just... So he has a lot to undo, and I'm really curious to see how he continues to like self-investigate, because the conversation with Jean, it was just a one-time thing. And unless he continues that work, it would be very easy for him to sort of stall out and feel like he fixed it and it's done now. And that's just not how it works. So loved this for him so much. Ashleigh says, my mom is one of those white people for whom salt is almost too spicy, and she's having dinner soon at a friend's house for a housewarming, and they are honestly panicking over what to make her. They're a chef, so they should be able to come up with something. Oh, God. Yeah, this is the thing. You have to know people, and it's good that your friends are panicking, honestly, because it means that they're aware. I tried to tell Owen, his grandparents, bless them, they are not great with spice at all. And it's not like I make things that have intense flavors and they still like them. It's not like they don't, because some people will just straight up be like, I just want my plain white bread and butter and chicken strips, and that's all. That's not how they are, but they aren't quite as ready for certain things. And he brought them to an Indian restaurant, and I just tried to tell him so many times, they're not going to like it, babe. This isn't going to... But he really wanted to share this thing with them because he had never had Indian food until I moved down here and brought him somewhere, because, you know, why would he? They never had it. And he loves it. It's like his favorite thing. So he wanted to share it, and they couldn't eat anything. You know, they like picked at like naan and rice, and there was like something that was fairly mild that might have been like a korma, and that was it. And I was like, babe, I understand, but you have to know what they're like. You got to ease them into this. Make one thing that's got some like curry flavor that is part of an ensemble of different dishes so that they can have other things as well. You can't just dump them into the deep end. What can you do? But anyway, okay. So, okay, where to start? I'm trying to work backward. Okay. From the things that like made me very emotional. I'm going to talk about Jean, because it's just, so there's this really intense scene with Jakob because he goes to the therapist to meet Jean, and she doesn't show because she's in labor, which he doesn't realize yet. And I just loved the whole way that this was handled. So he comes in to get his jacket in the morning while she's trying to put her shoes on, and her stomach is in the way of her bending properly to like get the straps buckled. Any shoes that have buckles are the fucking devil. I swear to God. As a fat person, reaching down to my shoes can be tricky as well. And you can just literally become like a sweaty, gasping mess just trying to fasten a buckle. It's disgusting. So I sympathize with that. And he comes in and he's really distant, gets his jacket. And when she says that we have like our couples therapy, he says, I'll think about it. And she doesn't press. And she goes downstairs, and both Ola and Otis are sitting there, and she kind of tells them, I know that you guys are aware that we're going through some things right now. And Ola is like, why isn't he here with you telling us this? And she says, well, he doesn't really think that we should be telling you this. And Ola just kind of, the reaction, you know what? I'm trying to remember exactly what it is that Ola says. But in short, Ola is just like, the fact that you're here by yourself talking to us makes me think that things are already like bad between you two. Bad enough that I don't want to engage without him here, basically. And Jean had also asked Otis to like do her buckle up, and he doesn't respond because he's giving her the silent treatment over her knowing about Maeve and everything. And there's a moment later where he kind of capitulates a bit on that. So you can't even agree on how to tell us. You might be splitting up. Lots of couples have differing opinions on how to parent children. And then Ola says, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to have a baby and make us all pretend to be a bizarre family. Ola has a fucking point. I'm just saying. And then Otis, like when he's alone with his mother, she says, I'm sorry, this is all a bit of a mess. And he says, everything you do turns into a mess, which is a really devastating thing to say to somebody, Otis. I mean, that was really harsh. I understand how frustrated he is, but that was rough. Like, you can tell when he says it that she is shook to her bones, you know? So she goes to have this like interview at this TV station talking about the situation with like education about sex in schools. And they're in the middle of talking about this when they get news that like some shit's popping off at this academy, and they have live footage, and she sees Otis, and it's like, I don't know if it's meant to be implied that the shock of seeing him engaging in this is like, because they're vandalizing the school also. They're spraying, spray painting a wall. And it's like not really vandal because it was already there, but whatever. But whatever it is that causes this, Jean begins to go into labor early. And this is sort of really, okay, yeah. So Ashleigh is in the chat saying, to be honest, with the recent developments on reproductive rights in the U.S., seeing Jean's labor going less than smoothly was extra upsetting. Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and grab these tissues here because I can already tell everybody, get ready. So Jean was warned that there were potential complications over being pregnant at her age. And, like so many of us, we kind of feel like those statistics are for other people and that they're really not going to be applicable to us, probably. It's certainly a risk, but I think a lot of us tend to feel we're going to be fine a lot of the time. There's, Jean is a smart, well-educated woman. And I think that there is a part of a lot of us who are educated that thinks that because we know the risks, because we're smart about like our health in certain areas, that we're going to be able to avoid the problems. And it doesn't work that way. If it worked that way, it wouldn't be what it is. So Jean goes into labor, and as she's in labor, Jakob is at the couples therapy appointment, and he is really, really angry that she isn't there because he doesn't know what's going on, which honestly, Jakob, it's a real point for me. When you are mad at somebody, you begin to see what they're doing through the lens of your anger. It just happens, and you have to be aware that it's happening so that you can sort of like work through that. But he is clearly not good at dealing with his emotions. So he is angry at her for thinking that she might be seeing other men still, or have been really recently. And her lateness is extremely out of character for her, for their couples sessions. Like, she's never done this, and he doesn't seem to be thinking about it that way. Maybe I should be worried that she's not here because that feels like it's not like her. That would be the way he was thinking if he wasn't so angry. But because he's mad, he makes it into, of course she's fucking ditching me because she doesn't give a shit, because she's not really committed to any of this, because I'm not important. And the therapist rightfully is like, okay, Jakob, why don't we talk about what's going on with you? This is so smart, because what the show needed was for us to figure out what was going on with Jakob. But he wasn't going to open up to Jean with the way he's feeling. And he wouldn't do it in front of her either. So having her be in labor while they're in this session so that he can be alone with the therapist is a really, really smart way to get him in a situation where he's talking and feels safe enough to say what he went through. And it turns out, yes, his wife died, but she was cheating on him before she died, and he had a really strong sense that she was going to leave him. And then she got sick, and it made all of the feelings around that really confusing. And the therapist asks, did you think about leaving? And he says, you don't leave somebody when they're sick, which is honestly, that's an outlier. Like, according to statistics, when a woman in a relationship with a man gets sick, upwards of, like, I think 65% of men wind up leaving their spouse while that woman is going through medical emergencies, because men are used to women being their servant. And when a woman does not perform that function anymore, she is no longer of use, and men move on. And I am not saying this out of nowhere. This is, you can look this up. The phenomenon of men abandoning women while they're ill is so high that many doctors and nurses out there begin to mentally prepare for a woman going through an ongoing chronic illness to also be dealing with divorce in their future coming up. It's that pervasive. So I just want to address that, first of all. The fact that he says you don't leave someone when they're sick, that is not the norm. And it is another thing that, like, thank you, Jakob, for being a fucking human being. But because he felt so bad about her illness, it never is dealt with that she was seeing someone else. So when the therapist asks him, have you ever dealt with your grief on this? He says, when she died, I got broken into pieces. And she's like, no. Did you ever deal with your grief about the fact that she was seeing somebody else? And it's clear he didn't. He still has so much rage about that. And he's throwing all of his baggage regarding that onto Jean. It makes so much sense. It really does. I really thought that all this was a fear of, like, abandonment because of his wife's death. It never even entered my mind to question the nature of the relationship that he had with his wife before she died. Because unfortunately, the thing in media so often is that a wife dies and is a saint, like, in memories afterwards. Everything about her is so, like, sort of coated in gold. Just, it's beautiful memories, and she was an angel, and it was like a perfect thing, and then cruelly interrupted by this illness. And instead, what the show is doing is making it really complicated, and she was a real person who wasn't great all the time. And it's just so real, you know? So he finally finds out Jean's in labor, goes to the hospital, and she gives birth, and they're having a moment of celebration. She's got the baby in her arms, seems to be healthy. I think it's a boy. And she says, I don't feel right. I feel strange. Something's wrong. And as she says this, she goes unconscious and begins to hemorrhage. And they usher him out of the room. And that's like the last we see. And I'm really worried because I would not put it past the show to kill her. Like, and I wouldn't even be that mad about it because it would be reality. So the reason I'm getting so emotional Ashleigh brought up the issue with like reproductive rights. And for those who are listening to this, maybe years in the future, you may not remember that like a week ago, we're in 2022, you would never know it, there was a leaked document about the Supreme Court potentially voting to overturn Roe v. Wade and take away the right to abortion for women federally. And sorry, guys. About 10 years ago, my mother got pregnant. And she was around Jean's age. She might have been a few years younger. And it was really unexpected. She was going through menopause, so she really didn't think she could get pregnant anymore. So I think she was maybe not being as careful as normal because she just thought it wasn't possible. And she underwent several, ultrasounds and scans, and they discovered that there was an issue. And that if she carried the baby to term, she would have like a 30% chance of survival. And they really recommended that she terminate. And her insurance wouldn't cover it. She would have died. Like, it was such a high likelihood that she could die. And they didn't deem it necessary. And she went and had to spend $3,000 to get a termination because her life was like in very immediate danger. And they just didn't consider it important enough to cover. Oh, God. I'm sorry, you guys. And this is what, like, when we talk about abortion rights and Roe v. Wade, it's so much more than that because you can say that abortion is legal. And it's, like, technically legal. Technically. But even now, before they try to take things away on a federal level, states and insurance companies make it really, really hard. And they don't care. They don't care about the lives of the people who are pregnant. And we act today as if the danger of being pregnant and giving birth is a thing of the past. We talk about it like back in the olden days when it was a real risk. Like, America has the highest mortality rate for people giving birth of any developed country in the world. Don't even get me started on the mortality rate of Black pregnant people, because that's just a whole other fucking thing. And we behave as if it's just not a real danger anymore. And as much as I hate seeing this happen to Jean, there's a part of me that is so grateful that the show is deciding to really show us that you can think, of course that's not going to happen. And it's real. It's still out there. It's still happening. And if my mother hadn't been in a position where she could have paid, if she hadn't been in the position where she could have had the option on the table in the first place, like, never mind paying for it, but if she had been in a certain state and had been far enough along, that would have been it. That would have been it. And she'd have to leave the state. And even then, coming back to the state could have been a risk of a prison sentence. Because she was trying to stay alive. And it's sick. It's sick. And there is no way for me to see eye to eye with people who claim to be pro-life. You're not. You're not. You're just flat out not. You are pro hypothetical infant life. And that's not even really true either. So this scene with her, it was just really upsetting. Because it could have been my mom. It could so easily have been my mom. And there would have been nothing to be done. It's just so, I don't know what's going to happen with she. She may wind up pulling through and being okay. It can still fuck your body up though. It doesn't mean just because you survive that you're fine. And everyone just behaves as if this isn't a real threat. And I'm just so tired of it being taken for granted that pregnancy is no big deal. And it's such a big deal. It's wild to me that we can simultaneously revere pregnant people the way that we do and also be so dismissive of them. It's wild. So anyway, that is just a really tough topic for me. And never mind the fact that I personally have had an abortion. I had one back when I was engaged to my first fiance, and I started to realize right before I got pregnant that he was an alcoholic. It was starting to grow so impossible to ignore. And when I realized I was pregnant, even though we were engaged, and one could have said, well, you just speed up your marriage and, whatever. I suddenly had this moment of realization that I could not tie myself to this man. I couldn't do it. And I was able to get an abortion at Planned Parenthood. I think it was the year, I'm trying to think, I think it might have been 2004. And it cost $650. It was still expensive enough to be difficult for people. And my mother, hers had to be so expensive because of the type of termination it was, due to the complications that had happened with her. So anyway, forgive me, I'm going to put my glasses back on now that I think that I have sort of finished crying. The very basics of finishing crying. Oh, God. Oh, God. Ashleigh is saying, I was just at a wedding for a family friend. She had her first date with her now husband less than a week before her breast cancer diagnosis, and she said to him that she understood if he didn't want to hang around as he'd literally just met her. And she's just recently got the all clear a few weeks before their wedding. Oh, he hung around. Yay. My mom had a pregnancy. I can't remember what it was called, but essentially the fetus itself was just a bunch of cancer cells. And given that abortion was illegal here, the doctor had to fight so hard for her. And I just think if she had any other doctor, I wouldn't have my mom and two youngest sisters today. You see, this story is not unusual. It's not. We just behave as if when people say well, what if the life of the mother is at risk? Look, abortion should just be available across the board. I don't give a shit about the fucking backstory, and nobody should. It's none of your business. But if we're going to talk about the backstory and we say, what if the mother's life is at risk? People will always act well, in those cases, of course. No, not of course. Absolutely not, of course. You're behaving as if that is such a rare occurrence that we don't even need to address it. We fucking do. Because even then, ugh, I'm disgusted. I'm so sick of it here. I swear to God. I just want to immigrate, and it's really hard to do, and I am not mad at anybody who does it illegally because frankly, God, go ahead, Anyway, so, and what makes this so devastating is later on, Otis is standing in the rain kissing Maeve. It's a big romantic moment. And he's getting a phone call and he hangs up. And obviously a lot of what's going, like the phone call is about what's going on with his mom. But so he has no idea that he's ignoring something that is potentially so difficult at the moment. It's Jakob calling him. I don't like that it's Jakob calling him. I'll say that because, and it could be that she's okay or that they're like in the midst of still treating her, because I'm sure she wouldn't be able to use the phone to tell him what's going on herself. But my father died a couple days after I dismissed a call from him and didn't pick up. This episode has hit a lot of triggers for me, guys. So, and I think all the time about how I wish I'd just answered. So I hope Jean's okay. Because that's a tough thing to, that's a tough thing to live with. I thought I was done, and I'm still crying. I'm sorry, everybody. Ugh, I hate it. Okay. So, let's talk about Maeve. First of all, Maeve and Amy make up, which makes me so happy. And it's like this immediate... Amy is standing there. She's got her piles of vulva cupcakes in boxes that she's bringing to the the open day. And she hands them off to her boyfriend to hand out, and he agrees to. And it is like the most... I just love him. And I want things to work out because I love the two of them because they're both good-hearted people who want the best for other people. And he is so willing to be patient with her. But I just can't blame her if she's like, I just can't do it. I'm sorry, you know? But that's neither here nor there at the moment. She's holding all these boxes and Maeve comes up and says, hey, and Amy just says, I thought we weren't talking anymore. And I love this so much. Amy is like all like aloof. I thought we weren't talking anymore. And Maeve is like, I was a fucking idiot. And immediately she turns around and it's like, oh my God, me too. I'm so sorry. And like completely changes her tone. And like, it's just, and she says, I'm really sorry for doing that without even asking. Like, I didn't know how hurtful it would be. She's just so great. I love Amy. She's the best. So Maeve is like, I need a really big favor from you. I don't ask for help. I push people away, and I'm going to ask for help right now. My mom ran off with my little sister, and I think I know where she is, but I'm going to need you to drive me. So they drive to this area that apparently her mother had brought her and her brother when she was trying to like make up for something after she had fucked up. And at first they don't think she's there. And then they hear her laughing and she's sitting on this bench with the little sister and a bunch of luggage. And when they ask the little sister what's going on, Ellie is like, Mom's taking me on a boat. Mm-hmm. So they have to have this talk, and it's like she brings up something about Maeve calling the cops. And Maeve says, do you know how much it fucked me up to do that? And her mother tries to like snap and be like, oh, it fucked you up. And thank God, again, Maeve is like, you know, I'm 17 years old. I shouldn't be in the position where I'm having to call the cops. That's it. Like, I am looking out for her. You can't stay clean. This doesn't mean you're a bad person, but she needs a home where she is going to be stable and cared for. And you know that. And eventually her mother hears her and kind of comes around. And it's just a really tough scene because her mother agrees to let Maeve take her back, but it's obviously absolutely killing her. And at one point she says, take her quick before I change my mind again. And she's just left like on this pier sobbing because she's doing the right thing, but it's absolutely tearing her heart out. And I cannot with this scene, guys, because doing the right thing isn't pretty a lot of the time. This like absolute sobbing is so visceral, and it's just really an affecting scene. And I'm so glad that her mom like sees the truth of what Maeve is saying. I was really afraid that she would just take off, but even so, like, it's hard to watch, because this is the thing about drug addiction. When she says it's not because you're a bad person, it's like people don't really get, if you haven't dealt with addiction in your life personally, it's really hard to explain the kind of hold that it has and the way it changes the behavior of people that you otherwise thought you knew really well. And somebody, like, when she says you're not a bad person, that is exactly the thing. It's not that people who are addicts are bad people, but they are being held hostage by something that has a chemical effect on them. Like, it's a genuine physical change. And it is so much more powerful than anyone who hasn't dealt with it can possibly imagine. And so when people are just like, oh, well, she chose drugs over her kids, you could put it that way. Or you could say she lost the battle. Like, she was fighting and she lost, because that's really a little bit more accurate, to be honest. It's not to say that we can't, like, people can't recover and get clean. But as they say, even once you're clean, every single day, you have to stay clean. You have to continue the fight every day of your life. It's not like one day you just stop wanting. You always do at least a little somewhere inside. And it's not, you don't just turn it off. As much as we wish that just stopping and staying clean for like a certain magical amount of time, like 5 years, now you just don't want drugs anymore. That would be nice. So yeah, this scene is rough. And Maeve, though, is really happy. She goes and brings her sister Ellie back to the foster mom, who offers to let her stay the night. And again, in a moment of her being vulnerable, agrees to stay the night and appreciates the offer. And she goes and talks to Amy to say goodbye. And Amy says, look, I know that my mom has money and that's awesome, but she also is fucking shit sometimes. How about we be each other's moms? And it's just this really sweet moment that I loved so much. And Maeve texts Otis and tells him that she found her sister and that she's safe and sound, and Otis decides to come over. Previously, Otis had been talking to Eric in the hallway about the fact that he and Maeve kissed, and I love Eric's reaction is just to be open-mouthed and not know what to say. It's so good. And eventually, he says something about, is my not wanting to be doing the clinic anymore, is that me being selfish and changing as a person? And Eric, bless him, says, no, you were heartbroken and you needed to protect yourself. You were doing it with Maeve, the person who you thought had like rejected you utterly, not even responding to your text. And I was so glad Eric like said it this way. So that's what Otis explains to Maeve and says in a moment of just such beautiful, instead of we have to just be friends, where just implies that being friends is not really its own reward. He says to her, I want to keep doing the clinic and I know it's just about money for you, but even if we can't be involved romantically, I still want to be near you every day, because not having you around feels wrong, which is just like, honestly, one of the most romantic lines. And I loved it so much. Oh, and Maeve says that it wasn't about the money for me either. And they kiss in the rain. And earlier she had run into Isaac, who hasn't been answering her texts, and she mentions that, and he says, well, I'm pretty annoyed at you right now. And then he has the absolute gall to just be like, I can't live with like always wondering whether you wish that you had taken a chance and tried things with Otis. And again, you took that choice away from her, Isaac. So you just don't get to be mad at her. I'm sorry. You can be mad in the privacy of your own heart, but you don't get to inflict any of it on her because you are the one responsible for the way this is going. It didn't have to be this way. You orchestrated it, and then you told her the truth because your conscience was bothering you, and now she's pursuing a thing that she would have pursued before getting involved with you. That is your fault. 100%, full stop, no question on you. So Isaac is pretty much back on my shit list. I had a hard time liking him, then I grew to like him, and now it's turned a corner again, and he's really acting like he's the aggrieved party here, and I just don't see it. You are not, sir. You are the one who started this whole thing down this road, and if you can't fucking take it, then maybe don't interfere with people's shit. And then he does the whole like, well, I hope your sister is safe and whatever, and I'm just like, ugh. So, yeah, just fuck Isaac. I'm done with him. So, okay, now let's talk about, I have so little time left. First, really awkward making out scene between Cal and Jackson. And it's real weird, guys. It's just, I just feel Cal isn't interested. Not really. And is just sort of pursuing it just to kind of see. And I feel like Jackson is so used to a straight hetero relationship that he doesn't know how to handle, Cal says something about how you'll be in a queer relationship. Are you cool with that? And Jackson says, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But then he gets sort of weird and he gets up and leaves. And it felt to me like it was supposed to be that he did have a problem with it. But I really believed him when he said it didn't bother him. So I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think of that. We have also a moment where Vicky is in front of a camera asking Eugene where he is, and he says at the door, and I'm like, word, and we don't see any more of that. But now let's talk about the actual assembly itself, which is something. First, Hope locks Cal in an office, grabs Cal by the arm, and chucks them into the office. First of all, I should say, Hope is out here getting physical with these kids, and it escalates quite a bit later with Ruby because she can't handle herself and the fact that these kids are not doing exactly what she wants them to be doing. So she pulls Cal into a room, locks them in, goes to the assembly like everything is fine. And then they begin this presentation. And first, Viv gets on stage and is like, Jackson is here to reclaim his title as head boy. And I love that this was not like discussed or anything. So he hops up there. And the whole thing, I think I kind of like didn't even mention at the end of the last episode about how Viv releases the footage of, or not the footage, the recording of Hope saying all this bullshit about how you pathetic teenagers need to get used to the fact that nobody gives a shit. I feel like I never even got there, but I had sort of thought that was going to be played to the audience. And instead, what it seems like that was Viv letting everybody know that we're doing a call to arms and getting together to jointly, as a student body, fight back against the person who is saying these things. And so they have this like video about not being ashamed of sex or of their bodies. And it's Otis and Eric up in the AV room, and she like storms up there and yanks the plug out. But then Ruby comes up and plugs it back in, and they fight back and forth, and she like really shoves Ruby. And finally, Ruby pulls out a fucking perfume bottle and sprays her repeatedly in the eyes with it to get her away. And it's kind of funny because Hope just kind of accepts defeat at that point. Like, it's just so clear Ruby is not going to fucking let you toss her. It's not happening. So she just lets the video keep playing and goes back downstairs. And this is when the chorus begins to sing Fuck the Pain Away. And they get into like this huge celebratory thing. It's a great scene. But I really do like that it's not like considered the solution to everything, because they are all agreeing that they are not going to be ashamed. But we still do have Cal locked in a room, who eventually climbs into the ductwork and falls through the ceiling in a great moment where Cal gives Hope the finger on stage. 2 fingers, really. And also Lily. I will not lie to you guys. I was super concerned about Lily this episode. She has this look on her face that feels like it's about to be self-harm time. And I was really worried when Otis goes to her house and knocks on her bedroom door and she doesn't answer. I had a real fucking sick pit in my stomach. And I'm so glad that's not what they wound up doing, because it wouldn't have been inaccurate to be like, yeah, okay, everybody at school is like celebrating themselves, but not everybody is willing or able to accept themselves or believe that other people accept them. And for Lily, it's not about like the school at large. The humiliation that she endured certainly was horrific, but it seems a lot more that she feels personally betrayed by Ola, the one person that she felt like she could really be herself with. And I had such a nervous reaction. Lily is pulling down all of the alien stuff in her room, and it just kind of felt like, I don't know. So it thankfully isn't the case. And Otis has realized after talking to Eric, he does like helping people and he wants to keep doing that. So he had told Ola he wasn't the person to ask to go talk to Lily, but he does. And basically tells her that what she's doing in creating art to escape into is super common, and that lots of people do it, and that art can be really valuable to other people because they may feel the same way and they haven't got an outlet, and now here's a person sort of creating things for them to show that like they aren't alone. And I really like that aspect of it as well. When you create art and you share it, it's not just about you anymore, and that's not to say that the work isn't yours, but it's just, it changes the dynamic, and it definitely can be, it can be helpful to other people in a way that you wouldn't expect. And that's true for me of the podcast, which is just wild, So I really, really like that conversation, but I also like the fact that like we have a bunch of people celebrating and really like sticking it to Hope, but then there are people that aren't quite as ready to do that. And that's also fair. So Rowan says, I think Jackson wants to believe he's evolved enough for a queer relationship, but he's having a hard time squaring it with his self-image as a heterosexual. That's true. That's fair. Yeah, I have a really, my maid of honor came out as non-binary about a year ago, and they are married, and their partner had a really hard time initially with like accepting and understanding what it meant. And, yeah, it was just a tough thing. So it's not, it just, the initial vibe I got felt like he really didn't have a problem with it. And I guess maybe it's that he stops and thinks about it and is like, wait a second. But yeah, I feel really bad because Cal kind of put their finger on it, I think, so to speak. So, Jackson, just don't let Cal down, But also, I just don't feel like that chemistry between them. I don't think that they belong together romantically. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't feel that, like, Cal doesn't seem attracted to Jackson that much. It really feels more like Jackson is attracted to them. And, I mean, like, maybe that's just tough. Maybe we want what we can't have sometimes, like, maybe Cal isn't into you, Jackson, and you're just going to have to deal with being like really good friends, because I could see mistaking the fact that you admire and care about somebody for thinking you're romantically interested when really it's more that you're kind of inspired by them, or that they are showing you a like part of the world that you had never experienced before. That's a very real thing. So Yeah. But yeah, okay. I'm over time. I barely got to talk about everything that happens. I'm sure I'm leaving something out. But, I just, guys, this was a very emotional episode for me, clearly. So, all right. Thank you again very much for listening. Thank you to Ashleigh for commissioning the episode. Thank you to Rowan for being here in the chat. Rowan has gotten their driver's license changed to their real name. Yay! So congratulations to Rowan. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.